Hi, I'm Judy Mottl, editor of RetailCustomerExperience.com. I'm here at NRF 2026 talking with Tom Yang, sales leader of strategy and transformation for NICE. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah.
Glad to be here. So the biggest buzzword everywhere is agentic AI.
Yes.
How do you guys define that, and where do you see it playing right now in the
Absolutely.
retail?
Yeah. By the way, I'd be curious if we go around and do a bingo card of how many times we see agentic right in all the booths. But it's a great question. It's a great question, and actually I would break it down a couple things. One is, I think for a lot of people, agentic, it's the decisioning, right? How do you have an AI agent make the decisions on its own within guardrails so that you're not telling it to do every single thing? Because in the old world, the challenge is what? The deterministic flows, as it were called, you would have to build hundreds, if not thousands of these flows. How do you manage that, right? A lot of brands can't afford to do that, can't afford the upkeep. Agentic is all about giving it guidance in paragraphs and narrative form, and it can make those decisions on its behalf.
Right.
And then to go complete an action. So again, in the old world, you said, hey, I could have a virtual agent that answers some questions, but what about doing something? What about going to cancel an order or place an order? So for us, a lot of it is giving brands the freedom to operate and not have all of the overhead that they had before with some of these other technologies. And at the end of the day, for the consumer, is the consumers feel like I'm not in such a rigid channel. Because when you have these flows that are pre-scripted, they feel constrained, right? You and I are consumers, we feel constrained. I have to answer these questions in this way. What if I don't want to answer in that way? Judy, what if I want to say size first for a piece of retail, rather than use case, or use case first, then size? This gives us the freedom as consumers to really shop how we want to shop and engage how we want to engage. And I think that's the importance of agentic commerce and all of that. So,
and one of the best definitions I've heard of agentic AI is that it's an agent for the consumer.
It is.
And it's all about the consumer.
Yes, and I think some of the way that a lot of brands are thinking about it that are great, in my opinion, is it's almost like an advocate to some degree on behalf of the consumer, right?
Yep.
Because the consumer is also not feeling it's a live salesperson that's pushing the product on me that they're selling. You can engage with this for hours, for days, and have it be a consultant for you in how you buy.
So companion.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So the other big buzzword is the digital shelf.
Yeah.
How do you guys define that, and where is that playing in retail?
Yeah, I think digital shelf ranges quite a bit, and I would say the one that we find most relevant is the concept of there are so many ways to buy now. You and I are used to going to a Google or a website. Well, even if you go to Google today, you get a generative answer.
Right.
And so I think you went from this, I search for a term, I get a web page result, to I search for a term, I use generative responses that gives me some answer.
Right.
And those generative responses, by the way, are crawling pages and finding information.
Right.
But then now we're getting into the frontier of agentic experiences. And so not only generative, but also agentic, how do all of those technologies find a brand's goods?
Right.
If you're an outdoor sports apparel retailer, how do you ensure that all of these different technologies are picking up your products and making recommendations for you? That is where we see a lot of challenges with this concept of digital shelf, as retailers are finding their products and their goods are not making its way into these recommendations.
Right.
And guess what? Consumers are increasingly buying through these channels. They're going to ChatGPT saying, what's the best pair of hiking boots? And if your result is not in there, you're missing sales. And so a lot of it for us is, ironically, when you think about it, the way that we used to do SEO, search engine optimization, is not dissimilar to how we do GEO, generative engine optimization, is not dissimilar to how we do agentic engine optimization. A lot of it comes back to make sure that you have clearly formatted information, clearly formatted content, things that are easy to read by AI, and there's guidelines that we can help share, and make sure that the more content that you can put out there from a best practices standpoint, that's what we're finding these engines picking up. It's no longer, Judy, about I just need a product description that says what it does.
Right.
But if you can say, this is best used for, it's best done this, if that makes sense, that's what the engines are really getting at, because they're looking for this content that is helpful to the consumer.
Right.
So if you have it as a brand, you're more likely to get it picked up. Now there's a myriad of other things, but those are some of the top things I would say are why brands need to pay attention and how you can start to rank higher.
All right, so how does NICE help the retailer with both agentic AI and that digital shelf?
Yeah.
approach?
Great question. I would say, look, we're a customer experience company. We do a lot of basically everything that touches the consumer. I would say to your question a couple of things, right? The funny thing is, I would say it starts even before those technologies we talked about. Before we even get to agentic and digital shelf, I have the saying, prescription before diagnosis is malpractice.
Right.
Think about that, right? Prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. If we are deploying technology before we diagnose what the problem is for a retailer,
Exactly.
we're throwing money away. And I say that because I think a lot of brands are rushing to deploy these technologies. But what's the problem you're suffering from? What's the diagnosis?
Right.
And so as we start to do the diagnosis, that's where NICE can help. Let's take your interactions, let's take your chats and start to figure out what's going on, what are you missing? Because then we can start to chart a course for, here's low-hanging fruit that has great ROI. But then, of course, the agentic technologies, the GEO, SEO, AEO, all of that are all technologies we have in our platform for our clients.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Terrific talking with you, Tom, as
Absolutely.
always.
You too.
Thank you, and check out RetailCustomerExperience.com for more industry news.